we're very focused on making this presentation as practical as we can. So I'm going to try and kind of act as a moderator and also kind of try to be that practical marketeer, if that helps you. So I'm going to challenge our other colleagues here to some tough questions. So and the other quick point to make is we're going to go quite fast throughout the slides. That's intentional because the area of AI and obviously international trade is very wide. We want to just give you a kind of a high level view of a lot of areas, and we won't have time to go in depth, but obviously we'll give you access to the slides afterwards, and also you can contact us. So with that, let's just do a quick introduction about Equitably AI. Just to note that we integrate a lot of partners. We're actually based at City University of London and have partners ranging from Samba Nova, who are the world's leading AI specialized platform, to a whole host of other providers, and we integrate those to provide bespoke solutions in AI. In the field of AI, I've spent more than let's say, I think something like 15 years or so in technology, in terms of business to business systems, enterprise systems. You have the area of products, then you have the area of software engineering and software development. One of the areas we have found, and it's quite common in AI, is the notion of use cases. I don't know if you have all heard that. It's very common in AI. The way I try to, in simple terms, explain it, it's somewhere between, I suppose, a product and a bespoke designed software. And the way we use it is to accelerate and speed up your application of AI. We have ourselves, and kind of close to now, I think around 25 or so use cases. We're quite specialized in certain sectors, right? But today we'll try to cover a few for you, and in as practical a way as we can. A context also, this is kind of to help you understand this very fast moving area of AI, and it's quite complex. We are constantly speaking to leaders across different industries. Everyone, and I was at a AI summit recently, everyone accepts that AI will be disruptive. The challenge is organizations are trying to figure out how to best approach it and where in their business. Now, I have been around technology, business transformation for a number of years. I do believe we, do need to go back to basics. An organization, no matter how large or small, fundamentally is about a number of activities. That's what an organization is, in my view. If we want to take it further, it is a process. Yeah. So we believe, and I'm quite passionate about this, that it has to be a process-based approach in order to apply AI, or in fact any system and any improvement and any automation. So that's the approach we take, and it works quite well, particularly in this nascent, fast-moving area of AI. And that's the approach that we would recommend in terms of your export and international marketing. As a marketeer also, we talk about export. To me, it is within the discipline of international marketing in terms of some of the top level steps. If you kind of look at those, doing market research, deciding your marketing mix, deciding your pricing strategy, deciding your place and distribution, where do you go in a new market like the US, and deciding your promotion in terms of that market. The challenge is, if you kind of look at those as the high, let's say 5 steps, there are tons of other steps underneath that, obviously, right? The question becomes, which exact steps can we apply AI? And I have to say also with Sam there, it's also data science, and Sam might explain that a bit later on. Where can we apply it? Because you can apply it anywhere. Where can you apply it with impact, where there's a strong business case and there's strong impact? And to us, it's really a mix of actually artificial intelligence and a bit of data science and human intelligence. It's the two of them together. And the trick is to know which step literally along that process or set of activities it is going to get you the highest impact at the lowest risk also. Dr. Tillman will talk about her risk a bit later on also. So with that, if you could kind of please try to, in the appendix, specifically, we are aware this is the International Trade Week. We have mapped out some 23 steps in the international marketing process, and we have shown use cases for AI ranging from segmentation to a whole host of other areas. That's in the appendix. We'll show that to you, and you can have access to it later on. So with that, if you could allow me to pass it on to, I think Dr. Tillman is going to talk about some of the actual use cases to start to make this practical for you. Dr. Tillman.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to just start by talking a bit about AI methods and applications in general. AI has been around for a long time, 50, 60, 70 years, depending on where you count as the beginning. And there are a number of techniques. The more traditional ones use small and medium-sized data sets, and they involve techniques like clustering, which can be used for market segmentation, and machine learning, which is well suitable for larger data sets, including things like classification that you can apply, for instance, for market dynamics, or regression, which, for instance, is useful for personalization. And there are application fields like natural language processing, where you, for instance, do sentiment analysis or social listening, and time series modeling, which is good for modeling markets. And then you can take these models to optimize what you do in terms of pricing, for instance. The more recent development is then to have generative AI. These are AI models that are not only useful for analyzing data and making sort of specific numeric predictions, but that can generate complex things like long pieces of text, or that it can generate whole images, and that can then drive chatbots, image generation, and therefore extremely useful in advertising. Next slide, please. So I wanted to start off by talking through a case study where we've been exploring the US market for clients about introducing eco-friendly cleaning products. So we've been thinking about how can we model and understand the market so that we can help our client to enter that market, introduce their products there. Next slide, please. So we start out by using classic market research. So we look at the size of the market. So we can see the US is the largest single market with a single language compared to all the others. So therefore, it's interesting to look into that market. Then we look at the propensity of consumers to buy eco-friendly products, and there is a good share. So it's like 17% always look for that, and over half at least sometimes look for eco-friendly products. And if you look at the lower left corner, there has been significant growth, especially during the pandemic, and much more in the United States than in the United Kingdom for eco-friendly products.
May I just give a quick context, Dr. So for everyone's benefit, this is a UK company that is looking at new export markets. They came to us and said, okay, we're looking at the US. Which state can we go to for our eco products?
Yeah, it's so we this is indeed the case. So we have on the lower right, you can see, is maybe a bit hard to read, but I can see there that there is a correlation between the propensity to spend on eco-friendly products and income. So demographics is clearly of interest. So next slide, please. Now, what can we do with machine learning and AI to improve this insight? And I'll give you a few examples, but we need to have more detailed data in order to do this. And data sources that we can use here are public APIs. So we've specifically used APIs that are provided by large companies, but they're also data provided by governments. On social media, you can find a lot of data, and general web publications.
So, Dr. Tillman, what are APIs? I'm sorry, for everyone's benefit.
Application programming interfaces. So
okay, but what does it do?
Automatically obtaining data through a program rather than going there and sort of capturing text from a website by hand, which is, of course, a tedious process. And there are also, if you're willing to go in deep and spend money, then there are plenty of commercial sources for data about consumers in a very detailed way. So the two examples here are one where we used a retail chain who gave access to data about their stores, about 3,000 stores, and we were then looking at the products they offer. We're specifically looking for all-purpose disinfectant and organic cleaning products, and we could then see the number of different products, so the range they offer, as well as the prices of these products. And then we correlate that with information about the location and the demographics to optimize or to understand where it's worth looking at the market, where's a good place to start selling.
Which state?
Second example, sorry.
Which state? I was saying that was one of the key things they were after.
Well, it's actually a bit more granular than that, even our analysis, but yet, of course, you can then determine the state. Sorry, can you go back one slide? We also, the second example is then going to complement that with insights into product reviews. So from another retail chain, we've obtained over 300,000 reviews of over 5,000 products and analyzed them using machine learning techniques that were specifically trained for language to better understand what people think about the products that are in the market. And then you can correlate that with the demographics that we've correlated with the location to get a bigger picture and make decisions. So next slide, please.
And from a marketing perspective, that helps you obviously identify gaps in the market and match to your brand positioning.
Absolutely. And so here is a quick overview over what we've done. So you can see on the top left the locations of the stores. So it's not every state has a store of this chain, but it's enough to give us data. And then we used openly available demographic data and can we use machine learning to predict the prices, the average prices of products sold and the breadth of the products available from the demographics. And it's not a perfect correlation. So you can see on the right-hand side our predicted values versus the true values, but it's good enough to give us a good sense of factors that drive these things and where would be a good fit for us. So we can then map out, even in places where there are no stores from this chain, we can map out where there would be a propensity for spending on higher priced products and looking for a broader offering.
To me, one of the great, Dr. Tillman, aspects of this is that, a company sitting in the UK can literally leverage off the research and the insights and the experience of distributors. That's what the team, I believe, looked at, right? Exactly. That's very powerful. Like historically, you couldn't do that kind of work in a kind of traditional way.
Yeah, we can specifically do it at a more granular level than you could with more traditional data sources and analysis techniques. So we can be very specific about locations and demographics. The next slide, please. So the second phase was to then look at product reviews, as I already mentioned, and we used models that are pre-trained on large amounts of text data. So that helps to get some sense of the statistical patterns in language, and they correlate to some extent with the meaning and with the sentiment and with what people think. And then this was fine-tuned to associate topics and predict review scores. And then we can use that for understanding what's in the reviews. Next slide, please. So we applied two ways of this in two ways. One was to predefine specific topics and then determine the scores for different products that they got on average in the reviews, or not really the scores, but the sentiment expressed about the products in the reviews regarding these different aspects. So, for instance, is this a good surface cleaner? Is this good for food and stains? Or is this good for the kitchen? Has this product good value? And so that you can use this to see what people think about different products and use that to identify a gap in the market that you can use for your own marketing or for product design, depending on which stage in the pipeline you are. On the right-hand side, we did something slightly different by clustering or using topic analysis that gives us different clusters. And by looking at the data, we can then identify what topics the clusters relate to. And some clusters are a bit mixed, so it's not necessarily a single clear topic, but some do have clear topics. And So we have, for instance, also here direct use or use case, and value appear as we would expect. But there's also one important one that wasn't really on the table, that is scent, which seems to play a really important role for users. What's the scent of the product? And so we can, in the data-driven approach, identify topics that are important to customers and address them.
And these could be different by countries, I suppose, right? Certain countries that, yes, that's very important.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So in the next slide, we actually have a slightly different approach. Now here we collected reviews that were specific to our clients' products. And here we had not quite as many reviews, but we had more specific information about the reviewers. So now we have, for instance, some information about location, sometimes about age, sometimes about gender. It's not complete information. That's very difficult to get, but it's good enough to make some analysis, and we produced this dashboard where you can then slice and dice the data in different ways to say, I want to look specifically at female or at male clients. I want to look at different locations or different age groups. And then you can see what influence that has on the distribution of the ratings on the topics that are mentioned. And you can also analyze this over time. So there were, for instance, some when a paid promotion was done, and then you could see the effect. There are more reviews because more people are buying the product. And you can also, there was one bad batch at some point that didn't smell good. And that immediately showed up in the reviews. Some people were saying, "Oh, there's something wrong here," and so it's really interesting that you can what you can learn about your product when looking at the reviews at some scale using natural language techniques.
In terms of the different applications, obviously this could be applied to your own product. It can be applied to competitors.
Yes,
and then it could also be applied to distributors, I suppose. That's what the kind of applications you mentioned. Sam's going to, now Dr. Tillman mentioned all the kind of detailed analysis that goes in there. I'm going to ask Sam to help us kind of think about the impact. How do we use that data in terms of impact, in terms of actionable insights, in terms of our marketing mix? Go ahead, Sam.
Thank you, JP. So everything that Tillman has shown you is the building blocks of insight. The data and the analysis has been used fundamentally with in the case of the cleaning products client to help with launch strategy in the US. And the US is a massive market, right? It's a massive market with finite marketing resources. How do you create the optimal launch strategy? That was our brief, essentially. How do you create that launch strategy? And all that analysis was there to guide the business to create an optimal launch strategy. So what I'm going to talk about now is an extension of that, which is specifically focused on getting the best bang from your buck from marketing and the return on marketing investment. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, please. Right. So the first thing we need to understand is that marketing budgets are not infinite. They are finite budgets. And when I talk about marketing, it's not, it's in the widest sense of the word, in the widest definition of what is marketing. You know, it could be your advertising. It could be your social media campaigns. It could be your pricing strategy, right? And the amount of promotions and discounts that you run. Anything that creates inward cash flow into a business is what I would define as marketing. The source of inward cash flow is marketing, and that's the marketing function of a business. So what we need to understand is, what is the incrementality that marketing brings to a business? What is the incremental revenue that marketing creates? And the diagram on the right is a simple hypothetical example of what we're talking about here. We're plotting revenue against time. And at one point, there is a blip in revenue, you can see that, which goes up and then it decays down and goes back to baseline. And that incremental revenue at the time of a marketing campaign is what we're trying to analyze. Quite often, when you look at the data, you won't see it like this. right? You need to do lots of analysis to actually tease out what is the incrementality of your marketing campaign. But understanding that is the first building block to getting to your ROI, your marketing return on investment. So fundamentally, the problem is you have a finite marketing budget, and then you've got to really understand how it's working. And by understanding how it's working and quantifying the different elements of the marketing mix, marketing is not just one thing, there are lots of elements to it, lots of levers. But if you can isolate and quantify the effect of each of those levers using data and analysis, you're in a position to do some optimization. So if you go to the next slide, we're talking about optimization. And fundamentally, optimization is about understanding response curves. So on the diagram here, what we're looking at is some work we did for a beer and cider brand, right? The y-axis there is your sales in hectoliters in another market, and on the x-axis we got the aggregated level of marketing effort, right? So as you increase the level of marketing effort, your sales go up, but at different rates, because I'm only showing 4 products here. There are actually 27 products in the portfolio, but I've just zoomed down into 4, and you can see that each of these 4 have a different response curve to your marketing effort. Understanding the nature, the shape and nature of these response curves allows you to do a couple of really interesting things, which is firstly, how much should we spend across each product and across the portfolio? And secondly, what is the optimal spend across do some portfolio management, basically. What is the optimal spend, not just as a portfolio as a whole, but how do you allocate that spend across different elements of the portfolio? And then when you drill down a little bit further, you can then isolate the effects of individual marketing components, whether it's advertising, whether it's promotions, whether it's social media or search. You can start looking at how different elements of that mix, each of them has a unique response curve that you can try and quantify. If you just press click, please, JP. So what we're trying to do here is step 1, budget setting and portfolio management, then go down to step 2, which is about understanding the different elements of the marketing mix. And from that, you can create the optimized marketing plan. And then finally, rather than having the output sitting in a PowerPoint deck, which you then use, you could use technology to put this into some kind of tool, an online tool that you can log into and run scenarios. And through scenario planning for the future, you can compare competing scenarios with different budget levels, different marketing mix. How do you maximize incremental revenue? And which marketing plan is going to deliver that? And that's essentially what the AI and data science give you, is to optimize forward-looking, is to maximize forward-looking inward cash flow into the business using a finite set of marketing resources. And the way we do this, we use the client's data that they have. Also, we have access to a database of norms, and that's quite a lot of other third-party data that we use that we can access to get to the answers. And fundamentally, what this process gives you is a way to improve your return and mitigate risk of marketing. Next slide, please, JP. Here's a case study from a retailer. This is actually a Swedish retailer who's ventured out into Taiwan. And this case study is actually from Taiwan. The process that the client wanted us to get involved in was with annual budget setting. How much should they spend next year? And the problem is, like every single business, they have a finite, limited set of marketing resources. So we took some data, we married it with third-party data, and like Tillman presented, an extensive data set that we were able to get our hands on. We did some modeling, we did some predictive analysis using AI, and we created an optimized plan for this particular client across the whole year. And based on the post-campaign analysis, we generated an incremental $15.6 million in terms of incremental revenue. So that analysis was done to say, look, had they continued doing what they were doing without the AI optimization, incremental revenue would have been $15.6 million less. So this was the incrementality. This is the ROI from the analysis, if you like.
Is a new type of application. It's not directly a new type of model, but the scale is different. So language models have been around for a while, but by making them much larger and training them on much larger amounts of text, it's turned out that they start to behave in a way that looks intelligent. It doesn't mean they are intelligent in the way that we are. They don't interact with the world in the way that we do. They don't know about the world what we do, but they're pretty good at producing text that answers questions in some way, plausibly, not necessarily always correctly. And they're also becoming multimodal now, so you can analyze images and generate images. So the one on the right here is actually an example that I've generated with ChatGPT-4, asking to illustrate a large language model, how it's processing text. And I thought it's a pretty decent artistic result. It can also process voice nowadays. I'm not going to go into that. And you've heard about the ChatGPT. Definitely, there are some others like Palm or Bard by other competitors. I think Elon Musk has just announced a new one called Grok. So this is a very hot area. There are also open source models like Llama and Alpaca that are hot on the heels of the commercial ones. Not quite as big, not necessarily quite as powerful, but they have the advantage that you can run them on your own system. So next slide, please.
What is the benefit of running on your own system, Dr. Tillman?
It's well, there are the number of benefits. Can you go to the next slide, then I can talk about it a bit more. Then let's jump into the business model part. The benefit of running on your own machine is that you have more control. There may also be a cost benefit, because if you use an API, so application programming interface, to get answers from ChatGPT, or if you use the whole service hosted on chat by OpenAI, so using ChatGPT or any of the other commercial providers, of course, they charge for it. So if you run it yourself, you may be able to do it in a more targeted fashion, maybe get it cheaper. But and that may be the most important aspect. You have full control of your data. If you want to use your own documents as part of the chatbot, for instance, then you'd have to give that information to your provider if you want it to be hosted by a provider. And although OpenAI has just started a new program with Enterprise ChatGPT, where they say they guarantee that the data is confidential, but you still have to trust OpenAI to manage the data for you, and people who have given you data may not agree with that. So there are data confidentiality issues here. And in practice, there is you can also have mixed solutions. So you can keep your data to yourself. You can extract so-called embedding vectors, and then just share the embedding vectors so that it's not easy to reproduce the text directly. And you can still benefit from better quality models. And there are generally different ways of adapting the models to your data. So one is called prompt engineering. That's something you have to do anytime you create an application with a large language model. Basically, what is the thing that the model sees, the prompt that is given to the model in order to answer your question? It usually gets more than just the question that you type. Then there is fine-tuning. So if you have newer data, more data, then you can repeat the training process. This is a very expensive thing, so you don't do that very often. And then there is something that's very popular now. It's called retrieval augmented generation, which basically means you have two phases. One is the model tries to find a relevant document or multiple relevant documents or sections from the documents, and then integrates that in the generation simple application. So this is ChatGPT. And simple application could be translation. These models are multilingual. And here is a German business letter, sort of introductory business letter. So I speak German, but not everybody does. So you might need an English translation. And you can get that very easily. Okay. And ChatGPT is one of the problems that might happen when you have a a service that is
There you
hosted
go.
by someone else, they might say, "Oh, we're currently a bit busy."
But this is Dr. Tillman, this is ChatGPT 4, right? This is the paid one.
Yeah, this is the paid one. Yeah. So if you want to use this service as I do here on the web, you need to pay around about $20 per month. If you use it via the API, you pay by how much you use it. So I prepared a second prompt here. So one thing that you may notice if you read this, which I have no time to do that, is it's a correct translation, but it's not written in the typical tone of a business letter as you would write it in the UK. So we can say, can you adapt this letter to the tone and conventions of a typical business letter in the UK? And it actually does quite a good job. So it starts with something like, "I hope this letter finds you well." That wasn't there before. And the tone is more like you would expect in a typical business letter. The one before sounded more like a translation from a different language.
So from the UK, you might be sitting here and you could write all these letters to all the different distributors in different countries to ask them questions, right? In their own language.
Exactly. You can do it in their language and in the style that is typical in their country.
That's great. Great.
So
got about 5 minutes.
Okay, so one final quick example. So here we can, so this is the chatbot that I prepared specifically for this unit. And we can say, assume I want to export lamb meat from the UK to Australia. Or we can do it the other way around. It doesn't make too much of a difference because the agreement is reciprocal. Then we get a quite detailed answer here. It says trade in goods according part 2 of the agreement does this, and customs procedures. So it gives already quite detailed account. And I might have some more specific questions about non-tariff trade barriers. And it understands my question, which is in the understanding in the sense it gives a reasonable answer. It doesn't necessarily understand the world, as I said, in the way we do, but if I ask for specific non-tariff trade barriers, I do get a very detailed and I assume helpful answers. I'm not an expert on meat exports, but this looks like it's quite a lot of relevant information.
We're actually working with some meat exporters in Australia. They're looking at the UK, and these were the actual questions. So it's a really good question that we're asking. And ironically, the free trade agreements aim to remove non-tariff barriers. So it's actually important to a lot of international.
So okay, so that was my demo. I could do more, but we're running out of time. And just one word of caution, so you need to always keep in mind these models are not perfect. The answers may not be correct, so you always need to keep the human in the loop if the answers have any actual impact on, say, legal matters or things like that.
In summary, I think we try to in a very fast way give you some snippets of the power of AI across that international marketing process and trade. You know, a common practical question that business leaders that we speak with come up with is to say, okay, but where do I start? So this is just a real simple kind of practical element of here. Either these are kind of the couple of options we see in the market and based on who we and our clients. One of them is a lot of companies, and I assume you're here partly for that, want to firstly learn about AI. So it is simply training yourself and we're talking about prompt engineering also, just to learn how to use these tools, learn the basics of AI. I mean, a lot of predictions are that it's going to be pervasive and it's going to be everywhere, right? So I think we all need to have a level of understanding of that. The next level of, I suppose, depth, and if I could just step back also just to remind myself of the times when I used to get involved in a lot of very kind of comprehensive business transformation, the experience says that any organization has a different readiness for maturity of taking on something like this, because it's ultimately a lot of change, right? So I think that's very important to look, regardless of your size, it might be even individual, in terms of your readiness, your personal readiness, what is the cost benefit? So the first one is the kind of easiest, but the least, I suppose, impact initially. The next level is to start to use the tools. And there are two options for some of these tools. There are a lot of off-the-shelf tools. One is for yourself to try and apply those, but you'll find as you go deeper and deeper, it'll require more and more learning. And some of it might be challenging, but that's fine. You can keep on doing that. Or you can get a lot of specialists in the market now doing even prompt engineering and are specialized in different AI tools. So that's the next level. Next one is to say, I don't want to kind of just almost like play around. I've heard that term used a couple of times. I don't want to play around with this. I actually want to see an impact in my current activity. If I'm doing a repetitive activity, whether it's a marketing campaign, whether it's social media, whether it's blogs, and by the way, we have applied AI to all of those, right? How can I make those steps faster and more effective and cheaper, right? And you can actually scope your project around that. And that kind of a project would take, 3 to 6 months, depending on its complexity, and it would require some resource. You'd want to make sure there's a level of quality in there to ensure impact. We've worked a lot, and I work with our data science team a lot, and we constantly try to challenge ourselves on the impact. We do not start projects until and unless we have done a robust business case that's measurable throughout and at the end of a project. And I think that's very important, because the great thing about AI and data science is, and you will notice most people talk a lot about data, you can kind of, and I have seen this, it doesn't happen all the time, you can kind of get lost in the data, in my view. You can kind of forget, and I have seen this literally in projects, you can forget why you're doing it. You're looking for something interesting. You forget what the business aim was. So this kind of structured approach to a project will keep you disciplined, and ultimately will give you the maximum return on investment. The next level of that is, and we're seeing a number of medium-sized and large organizations go across this, is to say, well, a program consists of a number of projects. I don't have to do just one project. I'm going to look at my organization, no matter how big or small. I'm going to look at all my functions. We're talking a lot about export and international trade, but it could cover other areas of marketing, right? Whether it's e-commerce, to doing advertising, to doing social media, to doing email marketing, account-based marketing, right? So you can look at all your activities across your marketing, and you can prioritize those for possibility of impact of AI, and we use tools for that, for example. And you say, okay, out of these 10 possible areas that I could improve, make my current activity better using AI, I'm going to pick these 2 or 3 using these very objective criteria that are proven in this field to actually work in terms of the ultimate impact. And that becomes kind of a program. And what's the definition of program? So you've got a couple of projects, you're going to have to actually build some in-house, that's how most of them do, in-house capability. And it will entail a level of basic, we kind of say governance, to say, okay, if I'm going through all this resource, what is the return on investment? And for example, some of our partners like Samanova, they strongly recommend to use AI as an asset. What they talk about is that you're actually building assets. So that's a kind of a program-based approach. With that, I think we can take some Q&A. Project, Dr. Tillman, you know about this, where we applied AI to email marketing. So there's a really good model. What it does is we have a prospect list. It looks at that prospect, it gets some public information on that prospect, it uses past emails that have been successful, it customizes those emails based on some very specific points from that specific prospect in terms of whatever it may be, and then it helps to send the emails out. So that was great. There was a model. What we found was we were using an external provider for that. We kind of initially, the team didn't think about from the time it generates it to the point that someone has to send it out, there's all this checking to be done, right? And that is really, we kind of drilled down on the concept of quality control, which is just kind of old school. I'm sorry, so I'm a bit of bias. I'm a chartered quality professional. That is old school manufacturing stuff. You do quality control along the way. And I think it's so important, in any of these tools, but they're so powerful. They can save you so much time, right? But we can't forget that human and quality element.
There are 2 things here. How accurate is the data, and how accurate is the modeling that you apply to the data? There are 2 factors here. After the event, it's quite difficult to unravel that, because all we know is, was it a successful launch or not? And I'm pleased to say that it was a successful launch, right? So the counterfactual is, had you not done that analysis and not collected the data, what would the launch have looked like, right? That we won't really know, but what we do know is the data and the analysis behind the data was essentially used to, make decisions, informed decisions. That's all we're doing here, is to help our clients make informed decisions and hopefully good decisions.
Yeah, I think the way, if I may kind of look at it this way, is a couple of levels. One is the data. The next level, as you indicate, is the model. To me, the next level is how good are the insights. Okay. The next level is how actionable they are. There could be good insights, but you can't do anything about them really. Then the next level is, out of all the actions, what is the impact? Sam, you were doing the modeling, you were saying, okay, we do different kind of marketing, right? They have different responses. To me, which ones have the biggest impact on sales? So that's the kind of, to me, the kind of phased layers. Historically, how does marketing do it? Historically, the way marketing would do it is do focus groups, do surveys to know what people sort of the target segment of the value proposition. I suppose the answer is, and there are some actually I will share. There's a list here quickly, if I may show. There's a list of, we have an appendix here. You can't see all the details, but we've listed all the different ways you can, some 20 plus ways you can apply AI. To different stages. But if you think about traditional marketing, you would do a focus group, you would do a survey. In actual fact, we've spoken with some people from that industry. What they're looking at doing is to say, how can we use AI to make that process more effective or even replace it? So I think, to me, I don't know, Sam, what are your thoughts in terms of how you think?
One important thing to add to David's question is, I mean, what are your competitors? What are their propositions? Right.
Good
so where do you fit within the brands that are competing in this category? So it's a nuanced question. It's very difficult to answer on a call like this, and this is also category and sector dependent as well. You need to be aware of how big is the category, how many competitors are there, what are their own individual propositions, and where do you fit into this? How do you create value in the category? But that's kind of like traditional marketing theory.
Yep.
That you need to then couple with.
Historically, the way marketing would do it is do focus groups, do surveys to know what people sort of the target segment of the value proposition. I suppose the answer is, and there are some actually I will share. There's a list here quickly, if I may show. There's a list of, we have an appendix here. You can't see all the details, but we've listed all the different ways you can, some 20 plus ways you can apply AI. To different stages. But if you think about traditional marketing, you would do a focus group, you would do a survey. In actual fact, we've spoken with some people from that industry. What they're looking at doing is to say, how can we use AI to make that process more effective or even replace it? So I think, to me, I don't know, Sam, what are your thoughts in terms of how you think?
One important thing to add to David's question is, I mean, what are your competitors? What are their propositions? Right. So where do you fit within the brands that are competing in this category? So it's a nuanced question. It's very difficult to answer on a call like this, and this is also category and sector dependent as well. You need to be aware of how big is the category, how many competitors are there, what are their own individual propositions, and where do you fit into this? How do you create value in the category? But that's kind of like traditional marketing theory.
Yep.
That you need to then couple with AI.
This is a really interesting question. So it's about the trade-offs that I mentioned earlier. When you have these large language models that are hosted, then you need to hand over some data. There is, I think, in general, the principle that you need to be, you should not use more data than you have to, hand it over to other people, especially if it's not only your own data. So if it's data of clients or business partners, you need to be especially careful given the data regulation that is in place in the UK and in the EU.
GDPR.
And, GDPR in the EU, and the UK regulation is very similar. And in the US, the rules are not as tight, but you still have to be careful. I don't think there is a perfect recipe, and also there is now new regulation coming. We just had this summit last week, and new regulation being announced. I would say there is no general recipe. You have to look at it case by case.
There's a practical way we know some of our clients do it. It's, for example, if you're using ChatGPT, they basically just do not put any commercially sensitive information in it. Simple as that. If they're coming up with some new ideas for products, they don't put it in there. If they're doing a letter, they make sure they take out the name. So that's a kind of one very simple, practical way of doing it. And many companies have stopped their employees, particularly larger ones. I'm sure you've heard, they don't allow them as a policy to use those systems for that reason. Particularly a lot of the banks actually stopped their
Quality
employees.
control is about collecting data, and interpreting data and understanding data always needs interpretation techniques. And AI is basically a collection of techniques that you can use to make sense of data, including quality control, for instance, by asking your clients about what they think about your products, but also applying sensors in your production. So there's a whole host of techniques here.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that. I'm trying to keep on time. We want to thank the International Trade Week team for giving us this opportunity. We want to thank you for joining us. We know this kind of area is quite complex sometimes, and thank you for all your wonderful questions. There are our details. If you have any questions, just reach out to us. There's the email, there's WhatsApp even, and also ITW have asked us to share this with you. If you have the chance to do a quick survey, they and us would appreciate it. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tillman. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and look forward to connecting with you through the different means that we have. We've done some work on that in terms of beers and spirits between Australia from wine perspective and here in terms of beer. One area is in terms of new product ideas. As you would know, in terms of beer, there are a lot of, I can't remember the exact term, but there's a lot of unique kind of flavors and brands coming up in the last, you probably know this better than myself. But what AI can do is, with the sentiment analysis that Dr. Tillman showed, that has a lot of power, not just understanding what people think, but you can link that back to ideation. So you can get AI to come up with new ideas in terms of the different flavors. We spoke to a company that was also in the vitamin sector. What they said to us is they constantly have to innovate the vitamin complexes to add new elements, small new elements, to differentiate, because it's such a competitive market. So I think I would say one area based on our experience is to capture sentiment, translate it into product feature ideas, and then score them.